On this Friday night, the U.S. Commander-in-Chief visits Canada's Parliament.
Americans and Canadians are two people, two countries, in my view, sharing one heart.
The progress on key issues and the wisecracks.
I like your teams except the Leafs.
Plus, the salute to two special guests. Israel's Prime Minister under fire.
Your own Attorney General says you're breaking the law.
Why critics say democracy in Israel is in jeopardy. And avian flu fears soar, the calls to vaccinate humans against this virus.
Global National with Donna Friesen.
Good evening and thanks for joining us. We begin with the American president's visit to Canada. It was Joe Biden's first visit to Ottawa since he was elected president, a chance for he and Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to renew the relationship between the U.S. and Canada, which share long-standing economic, defense, and national security partnerships.
We're lucky. We have Canada to our north, share these values. All the values are the same. We disagree in degree on things occasionally, but there's no fundamental difference in the democratic values we share.
Biden addressed Parliament, stressing how interconnected the two countries are. There's news tonight about immigration. Unofficial border crossings at places like Roxham Road in Quebec will be closed as of midnight tonight. As well, defense and Haiti are on the agenda. David Akin was listening to Biden's speech and has our top story tonight.
Good afternoon. Bonjour, Canada.
Good friends, Canada and the United States, but friends with issues nonetheless. U.S. President Joe Biden, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, and key members of their cabinets spent the day working through those issues, and both sides say they made significant progress.
Mr. President, as it should be, our two nations stand united in this moment, finding solutions side by side.
On Canada's concern about irregular migrants flowing into Quebec at the Roxham Road border entry, a deal that ends that practice and returns anyone who tries to walk into Canada from the U.S. back to the U.S. That goes into effect at midnight tonight. Canada, meanwhile, has committed to take in 15,000 more regular migrants a year from Central and Latin America.
We're expanding legal pathways for migration to seek safety and on a humanitarian basis, while discouraging unlawful migration that feeds exploitation and human trafficking.
On Haiti, Canada is putting up $100 million worth of aid to boost police forces there, but no commitments on sending personnel for now. Canadian government sources, though, say the bigger news from this state visit involves plans to further integrate our economies now in transition to a greener future.
Economic policy is climate policy, is security policy.
There's an agreement on a new cross-border semiconductor manufacturing strategy, on a new energy transformation task force, and on new funds to protect the Great Lakes and the Arctic.
Today, as we stand at, as I said today, an inflection point in history, our nations are once again called upon to lead. And together, I believe, we're answering the call.
Now, Canada is going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to fulfill its bargain as a part of these agreements that it announced today. Look for details on how and when that money is going to be spent in next week's federal budget. Donna.
Okay, David, how was the speech received?
It was received very well, and probably because the president started off by reminding his audience that the two countries share so many things, including our shared love of sports.
Baseball, basketball, hockey. Listen to this, hockey. I have to say, I like your teams except the Leafs.
Now, I'm not going to explain why he doesn't like the Leafs. It's a long story, but that got a big laugh, that line, and it was a really good icebreaker for the speech to start, Donna.
And this was a speech largely about shared values and interests, David. The relationship certainly does seem less tense than under the previous president.
It does, and I think for a lot of Canadians, they were looking for the president to give what essentially is the first speech by a U.S. president that is the first post-Trump speech. And in that sense, Biden was looking to renew the friendship. I think he was looking to smooth some feathers that might have been ruffled by his predecessor. He spoke for about 45 minutes. This was the key section.
Today, our destinies are intertwined, and they're inseparable. not because of the inevitability of geography, but because it's a choice we've made again and again. The United States chooses to link our future with Canada because we know that we'll find no better partner. And I mean this from the bottom of my heart. No more reliable ally, no more steady friend. And today I say to you and to all the people of Canada that you will always, always be able to count on the United States of America. I guarantee it.
And you can hear the applause there in the House at that time. Everybody was standing on their feet, clapping. Liberals, Conservatives, New Democrats, all the guests in the gallery. And I think they're hoping and wishing that that sentiment remains true. Donna.
Okay, David, thanks. There were multiple standing ovations during the speech, including for two of the guests who were in the gallery, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig, who were detained in China for more than 1,000 days.
And I'm very glad to see the two Michaels, Michael Spavor and Michael Kovrig. They're safely back to their families.
The president acknowledged them and stressed the importance Canada and the U.S. place on defending human rights. Biden didn't talk about China in his speech, but it was part of the agenda during the meetings, and it came up during a joint press conference this afternoon. Our Ottawa Bureau Chief Mercedes Stephenson was there. Mercedes.
Well, Donna, obviously a visit that really struck a lot of positive notes on major issues. Everything from trade to regional integration to security was discussed. But there was one issue, as you just mentioned, that was notably absent until it was raised by a Canadian reporter. And that was the question of China. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was asked to respond to reports about Ontario MP Han Dong engaging with the Consulate General in Toronto for Beijing over the two Michaels. The Prime Minister was asked whether he believed that Dong advocated for the delayed release of Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor. The Prime Minister did not directly answer that question, despite his office having said that they've seen a transcript of that conversation. He did, however, take a moment to speak about Dong. Take a listen to what he had to say.
Han gave a strong speech in the House that I recommend people listen to, and we fully accept that he is stepping away from the Liberal caucus in order to vigorously contest these allegations.
And Donna, important to note that Han Dong has vigorously denied the allegations and says that he only ever advocated for the two Michaels to be released immediately. President Biden was also asked about whether he wanted to respond on China's alleged interference, but he just kind of shook his head and didn't answer anything. At one point, he did mistakenly refer to Canada as China, though, during his address to Parliament, turning that misstep into a joke to tell MPs that now they know what he's really thinking about. But for whatever reason, he didn't articulate it any further than that, and China was much less on the agenda publicly than it has been when the two leaders have previously met.
And Mercedes, what's your sense of what this visit has accomplished?
Well, there were some serious victories for the Trudeau government, including the renegotiation of the Safe Third Country Agreement, which will kick in tonight at midnight, as you were just discussing with David. It wasn't clear heading into the meeting whether the Americans would be willing to close that irregular crossing at Roxham Road. Of course, people are crossing into Canada there, but there needed to be a renegotiation of the Safe Third Country Agreement to accomplish that, and it looks like they've got that kicking in very quickly, so it's a significant win. The leaders also talked about securing access for electric vehicles to American markets, and they shared their commitment to defense and security. There were also major announcements about NORAD, including a system to be built here in Canada, a strong message on the importance of defense and security, including NATO, and supplying more troops and training, more training for troops and weapons as well for Ukraine. Defense spending, of course, has been something that both Republican and Democrat presidents have wanted to see Canada step up on.
Mercedes, thanks. The Bidens are at a gala dinner hosted by the Prime Minister. A long list of notable Canadians are expected to be there. Turia Isri is at the venue. Turia, do we know who's invited?
Well, Donna, the unofficial guests of honor are the two Michaels. Now, they just arrived moments ago. They walked along this red carpet. Now, they didn't take any of our questions. They smiled and waved, but the fact that they're here is quite remarkable. It was an unexpected invitation. And both Michaels have kept a relatively low profile since their release from a Chinese prison. They've given few interviews, so the fact that they're here, is quite symbolic. It's a real symbol of Canadian and U.S. partnerships. It was U.S. President Joe Biden who was quite instrumental in negotiations ahead of their release. So quite remarkable to see them here. And there are about 450 dignitaries and delegates who are here, politicians, celebrities. So it's quite a long list, but it's really these two men who everybody's been watching for.
And Turia, do we know what's on the program for tonight?
Well, it's already gotten underway. It began with performances. There were Inuit throat singers and Métis jiggers. Alan Doyle is also expected to perform. And then there are going to be speeches, toasts, and then the dinner. And there are other notable Canadians who are here. Sarah Polley, she just won an Academy Award. And a very famous Canadian comedian, Eugene Levy. So we spoke to him a little bit earlier. Take a listen.
It's very, very, very special. I mean, you know, I'm glad to be here. It's an honor to be here. It's nice to know I picked the right profession. Probably wouldn't have been here otherwise.
Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre also attended tonight's gala. It caps off a 2-day visit for the Bidens. Once dinner wraps up, they'll make their way back to the U.S. Donna?
Right, Turia Isri in Ottawa tonight. Thanks. The First Lady Jill Biden had a chance to explore a bit of Ottawa today, including something quintessentially Canadian. Sophie Gregoire Trudeau accompanied the First Lady as they watched young athletes at a curling practice. They also took part in a discussion about mental wellness with some young Canadians. And no trip to Ottawa would be complete without stopping at the National Gallery. Jill Biden toured an exhibit featuring Canadian women artists. Israel's Attorney General says his Prime Minister has broken the law. Coming up, the firestorm facing Benjamin Netanyahu. In Israel, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu refuses to back down on judicial reforms that many believe are fundamentally undemocratic. Anger accelerated on the streets yesterday after Netanyahu's right-wing coalition government passed a new law making it harder to remove the prime minister from office. And there's anger that changes Netanyahu is making to the justice system will give his government the final say in choosing the country's judges. It has reached the point that hundreds of soldiers and reservists are refusing to obey orders. And even Israel's Attorney General warns Netanyahu is breaking the law. Eric Sorensen reports.
Mr. Netanyahu, your own Attorney General says you're breaking the law.
If Israel's Prime Minister thought a quick trip to London would afford him a break from his troubles at home, he was mistaken. Protesters outside 10 Downing, like those in Israel, are furious with an Israeli law they say will give more power to Netanyahu.
And we are more determined than Bibi is. This is a war for all Israelis to fight.
Yesterday, the Israeli Knesset passed the law. It allows parliament to override court decisions and makes it harder for the courts to remove a leader. Netanyahu has been charged with bribery and fraud, which he denies. His attorney general wrote an open letter that it was illegal for him to be involved in making changes while he is on trial. I will do everything, he says, to unite the country, but adds the law will restore the proper balance between the courts and parliament. Many Israelis see a leader simply trying to protect himself.
So Netanyahu just decided to sold us so we can continue to be the Prime Minister of Israel.
Netanyahu has formed a hard-right coalition government. His finance minister said in Paris this week there is no such thing as Palestinian people. Ottawa condemned the remarks, as did Washington, which normally stands with Israel.
We utterly object to that kind of language.
In the West Bank, Palestinians decried his remarks. We belong to this land, said the Palestinian Prime Minister, but it is among Israelis themselves that Netanyahu faces a crisis. Even in the military, many Israeli reservists who play a big part in Israeli society are refusing to report when called up.
There cannot be an army of the people under a dictatorship.
It is costing Netanyahu at home and Israel's stature abroad.
This is an assault on democracy. It's an assault on judicial independence. You can see that there is incredible opposition to this government throughout the state of Israel and throughout the world.
Netanyahu may hope the opposition loses steam and goes away, but for now, it follows him wherever he goes. Eric Sorensen, Global News, Toronto.
Bird flu fears ahead. Do we need a human vaccine for avian influenza? Cases of avian flu in birds are on the rise in many countries, including Canada, and health experts warn the strain of viruses is changing in ways that raises concerns it could potentially drive another pandemic. The risk of transmission to humans is low at the moment, but as Catherine Ward reports, that could change.
The headlines: the worldwide avian bird flu outbreak is causing concerns amongst researchers. And the closures.
The birds are under quarantine because of a threat posed by avian flu.
The spread of bird flu in Canada since late 2021 has experts on alert.
The first wave was in March of 2022. Second wave was approximately in August or September of 2022. And this is the third set of outbreaks that we are seeing in Ontario.
While experts have maintained the risk to the general population is low, the way the virus has been behaving in recent months is raising concerns. Other animals are getting infected, including skunks and seals here in Canada, in what scientists refer to as spillover events.
It seems that the virus has become adapted or is in the process of becoming adapted to mammals. That is very disconcerting, because that could be a prelude to adaptation to humans, and that's precisely what we don't want this virus to do.
Cases of avian flu in people are rare, but not unheard of, particularly in Asia and the Middle East.
So when these viruses do cause human infections, the mortality rate can be as high as 50%.
Some experts say production of a human vaccine for bird flu needs to be on the table sooner rather than later.
There are actually a lot of large multinational seasonal flu vaccine manufacturers who are capable of making bird flu vaccines using their existing infrastructure.
Experts know the value of being prepared.
There will be more pandemic potential viruses emerging, and we need to have a much better system and a much better mechanism for predicting how, when, and where viruses are going to emerge.
Catherine Ward, Global News, Toronto.
Next, who's paying attention to the U.S. president's visit to Ottawa? The relationship between the U.S. and Canada outlasts whoever happens to be in power, but the personalities and the politics of the leaders can affect the relationship. Right now, the Prime Minister and the President are said to genuinely like each other, and it certainly appears that way. So what's the reaction to this visit in the nation's capital? Mike Armstrong went to find out.
If you shot it from some angles, you could make it look like a lot of people. It really wasn't.
Yeah, well, we were here for Prince Charles and Camilla, and it was a lot of people.
This was basically one of the best spots to spot President Joe Biden in downtown Ottawa, along the motorcade route. This man brought his young son for what was a rare opportunity.
Just kind of an important person. You know, they say he's the most powerful person in the world, right? So.
Hey, look what's happening. When the moment came, it was, of course, one of those blink and you missed it occasions.
It was about 30 seconds of actual action, right?
Was it worth it? Well, sort of.
There was a lot of cars, a lot more than I thought there would be.
I thought he might wave or something, right? But you couldn't even tell where he was. Yeah. I couldn't even tell.
Now, a presidential visit to Ottawa is a big deal. This reporter has covered a few. With Barack Obama in 2009, we did excitement stories before, during, and after. When Bush visited in 2004, yes, I'm that old, protesters prepared for weeks for action.
I think it's quite a good start. We got a lot of people out here.
Well, for this presidential visit, Ottawa seems to be lacking enthusiasm. On a scale of 1 to 10, how excited are you about this visit?
0.
Now, that was the lowest result we got.
5, 6.
But overall, while admittedly unscientific, we got an average of 3.7.
Honestly, about a 6.
Probably a 3.
How excited am I? 1.
Now, there was one place excited by the visit, this Ottawa bakery.
He was standing over there.
Barack Obama dropped by unexpectedly on his 2009 visit and bought 3 Canada cookies. The owner then rebranded them Obama cookies, and for 14 years, they've been a huge seller.
Over 1 million cookies, bien done.
1 million?
Yes, monsieur.
Now, there was one moment caught by cameras Wednesday where Biden was given a Canadian candy bar. It was made by a company started by Syrian immigrants in Nova Peace by Chocolate. But this visit may be remembered for what it accomplished. rather than excitement or anything extracurricular, which, by the way, is pretty typical for Joe Biden and probably not a bad thing. Mike Armstrong, Global News, Ottawa.
And that is Global National for this Friday. I'm Donna Friesen. Tonight's Your Canada is the Aurora Borealis. You usually have to travel to the far north to see northern lights like this, but thanks to a geomagnetic storm, they are dazzling people in southern Canada, even in the U.S. We'd love to see your Canada. Please email it to viewers@globalnational.com. And thanks for watching. Farah Nasser will be at the anchor desk tomorrow, and I'll see you again on Monday. Have a lovely weekend. Bye-bye.